Hello there, welcome to my YouTube channel. I'm Margaret. Our topic today is family traits. When we talk of family traits, we remember genetics. So, what is genetics? Genetics is the study of hereditary and variations in living things. Note the two words, hereditary and variations. So, it studies hereditary and it studies the variations in the hereditary in living things. Then, what is hereditary? Hereditary is the transfer of traits or characteristics from parents to their offspring or progeny. So another name for offspring is what? Progeny. And the transfer of traits or characteristics from parents to their offsprings, which is known as inheritance or hereditary, can be seen when a child inherits or has the father's color of hair, or the father's tallness, or the mother's complexion, which is fair or dark. So these are certain traits that a child can inherit from the parents, and it's called what? Hereditary. These traits or characteristics are usually shared among families, like the parents, the grandparents, aunts, and uncles. So the traits are usually within the families, is shared amongst the members of the families, like the parents, the grandparents, the aunts, the uncles. It does not extend to outside. You cannot say you share the same characteristics or traits with members of your community or your neighbors or the people in your country. It does not have to do with them. It's strictly restricted to families. So it's either a child inherits the father's tallness, the child inherits the father's color or blood group. These are resemblance shared amongst the peoples in the family. Now let's take a look at this picture. You can see a mother and a father with their daughter. You can see from this picture, the daughter takes the eyes of the mother, while she takes the ears of the father, and also the hair color of the mother. Then in this other picture, you can see that this child looks exactly like the mother. So we also say that no matter how a child can resemble the father, it does not make them the same individual. They are still different individuals. They are unique in their own way. So that's where we talk about variation. So the changes in this inheritance is called what? Variation. Okay, so that brings us to family traits. What is family traits? It's a transfer of inheritable traits or characteristics from parents to their offspring, or from generation to generation. So these certain traits that are being transferred from parents to their offsprings must be inheritable. They are not learned. They must be what? Inheritable. So certain inheritable traits that we transfer from parents to their children, or from generation to generation, that's from grandparents to the grandchild, or from the great grandparents to the great grandchild, or from the great grandparents to the grandchild. So it can occur in any generation. So examples of those inheritable traits, we have complexion. One, the complexion can be dark or fair. Two, we have the height, would be tall or short. We have certain diseases such as sickle cell anemia. Then we have the albinism. And then 5, we have the blood group, which can be blood group A, B, AB, or O. Now let's take a look at this picture. You have the inherited traits. You can see that this child looks exactly like the father. But remember, no matter the striking resemblance, it does not make them the same. They are still different individuals. So you can see how she looks exactly like the grandfather. And then from this picture, this is an organism. You have the flower and the chick. They are both living things. Then you have a learned behavior. A learned behavior is something someone learns. It can be a skill, like how to drive a car, how to ride a bicycle, how to play the piano. So these are certain traits that one can learn, but they are not inheritable. You cannot transfer them. You can decide to teach someone how to do it, but it's not an inheritable skill or trait. And here you have an offspring. You can see the chicken that gives birth to these young ones, and then you can see the parents with their children as their younger ones. So that's what you call offspring. So during reproduction, there are two genes for one trait. So you can say that trait is the information, while the gene carries the trait. That carries the information and tells us about the trait. So for each trait, we have two genes. For each trait, we have two genes. So simply put, an individual has two genes representing one trait. Okay, for example, a father who has two genes transfers one gene to the child, and the mother who has two genes also transfers one gene to the child. So the child has two genes, each inherited from both parents. So for example, you can take a look at this picture. A trait, you have a trait here which shows the appearance of the flowers. You can see the purple color and the white color. The purple color has the dominant gene. That's why it's presented with this letter. And then the white color has a recessive gene. That's why it's presented with this letter. So during reproduction, the parents flower produces half each of these genes to produce one full gene here, and then same thing with this to produce one full gene here. So when these two genes comes together, the child inherits them, and then the dominant gene in the child shows the color of the flower. The dominant gene in the flower shows the color of the flower. That is what will be expressed in the flower, just like you have here the capital letter and the small letter. This is the dominant gene and the recessive gene. So when the recessive gene is in presence of the dominant gene is more expressed. That is why you have the purple color here showing the dominant gene of the parent flower. So there are two types of genes. There are two types of genes. The gene can be dominant, can be what? Recessive, just like we saw in this picture. So one, we have the dominant gene. The dominant gene is usually expressed. The gene that is usually seen in an individual is more expressed in the individual. It's physical. That is what shows what the individual is. If the individual is tall, that is the dominant gene it has. If the individual is dark, that is the dominant gene that is what expressed. So the dominant gene, this is the gene that is expressed in an individual, is usually represented with a upper letter like this. So you can choose any letter you like, but it must be in upper letter like this. Then two, we have the recessive gene. This is a gene that is hidden. It's a gene that is hidden in an individual. It is usually hidden when it's in the presence of the dominant gene. You can say that it's submissive to the dominant gene. It does not show itself. It does not show itself. It is not seen. So when someone is tall, the person might have that recessive gene in him or her, but you might not know because what you're seeing is the dominant gene. So this is a gene that is hidden in an individual. It's not shown or seen. It can only be seen when it combines with another recessive gene. So it can only express itself when it sees its brother or sister as another recessive gene. Then it then comes out and shows itself. It's usually represented in lowercase. This or this. You can use any letter, but it will be in a lower form. So let's take a look at this picture. You can see a father You can see a father with a dominant brown color eye and a recessive blue eye color, which is the small letter B. Then you can see the mother with the same gene, a dominant brown eye color, which is presented in capital letter, and the small letter, and which is recessive for the blue eye color. So when during reproduction, the father donates each of his genes, and then they produce this. You can see that one of their children, this has a dominant eye brown color. This has a carrier of the blue eye color. This has a carrier of the blue eye color. But since it's in presence of the dominant, this is a dominant gene, so you're seeing it as brown color. You're seeing it as brown color. So why this one is recessive for the blue eye color? So it's more expressed because it's not in the presence of the dominant gene. So they are both recessive genes. That's why you're seeing the blue. So when this recessive gene combines with his brother or another recessive gene, you can see that all of them will be recessive gene. All of them will be in this form. So that is that. So we have the chromosomes. There are 23 pairs of chromosomes in every individual. Every individual has 23 pairs of chromosomes in him or her. So the first 22 are called autosomes. Each section of these chromosomes carries the genes. The last chromosome is called the sex chromosome. The last chromosome is called the sex chromosome. That's the 23rd chromosome, which determines the sex of the individual, whether male or female. The female chromosome has two identical chromosomes represented by XX, while the male chromosome is represented by X and a smaller y. So you have the XY. So let's use this picture to explain what you've just read. You can see that in this picture, these chromosomes are in circle combined together. So each of these circles, known as the sections, carries a gene. So the gene could be the gene for tallness, it could be the gene for shortness. So it's these chromosomes that determines a dominant gene or a recessive gene. How does it do that? So when each of the sections carries a gene for tallness, let's say the first section carries a gene for tallness, the second section carries a gene for tallness, the third section carries a gene for shortness, the fourth section carries a gene for tallness, the fifth section carries a gene for tallness, just like that. As it goes to, it reaches the 22nd chromosome. So at the end, you calculate the number of chromosomes for tallness, the number of genes for tallness, and the number of genes for shortness. So if the number of genes for tallness is high, you know it's a dominant gene. Or if the gene for shortness is smaller, you know it's a recessive gene. So that's how we determine a dominant gene and a recessive gene. So if the gene for tallness is higher, the dominant gene will be expressed in the individual, showing that this person is tall. So if the gene for the one that is smaller will not be hidden inside the individual because it's a recessive gene, so it will not be what expressed. So we have the sex chromosome, which is determined by the 23rd chromosome. It's called the sex chromosome. It determines whether an individual is male or female. So you can see the chromosome for male, which is represented with XY chromosomes, and then this one, that for the female, has two identical chromosomes presented by two identical letters. That's the XX. So importance of family traits. 1. It determines the sex of an individual, just like we talked about in the group using the chromosomes. It tells you whether the individual is male or female. 2. It determines the character of an individual. So just like a child inherits certain traits from the parents, you can tell whether this trait is whether this trait is tall, whether this trait is complexion, that is whether it's dark or fair. So, or whether this child can easily get angry, certain traits that can be inherited from the parents. So it determines such traits in an individual. 3. It shows certain diseases that runs in the family. For example, sickle cell anemia. It tells if this individual that has sickle cell anemia is inherited it from the parents or from the grandparents, or if it's something that one can just treat because it just came about. 4. It determines the blood group of an individual. So it determines if the child has blood group A, blood group B, blood group O, blood group AB, just like the parents. Then 5. It traces the family genealogy of or pedigree or family tree. So it tells us the lineage of the parents, the family history, what's about their grandparents, the great grandparents, how they are, how they look like. So then we have the genealogy. What is genealogy? This is the lineage of the parents and offspring traced down to their descendants, or simply put, is the family history or ancestral line. So you can say that the genealogy is the family history. It talks about the lineage of the parents or of an offspring. So you can take a look at this picture, which represents the family tree. Another name for family tree is pedigree. So you have the grandparents, here is the grandfather, here is the grandmother. So they give birth to these two people. So they get married. This one has a husband, now have children. See this son, this is the sister, and this is the sibling. So the brother of this gets married and then becomes an aunt and an uncle to these people, and then their children becomes cousins to these people. So that's all about the family tree. All these pictures are Google credited. Thank you very much for listening to my YouTube. Please give me a like. Thank you.